can we get this stupid thing built out and opened, and before that, can we get the loan money? I mean, like success is something you always put out on the horizon for better or worse, and you're sort of always working towards that next goal. I'm very task oriented, so that's good.
Hello, Business of Happiness Hive. Today we have Dr. Kyle Fagala. And if you know Dr. Kyle Fagala's name, then you know that he is the co-founder of Neon Canvas, which so many of you might be familiar with, but he's also the digital orthodontist. I cannot wait to share with you this fascinating conversation with Dr. Kyle Fagala. He's a successful orthodontist, but is also on the same journey so many of us are on in terms of just trying to find happiness and fulfillment and joy in our lives. And in this episode, he shares with us how he's trying to make that happen in his life. Very vulnerable, very honest interview, and a side of Kyle you may never have seen before. So join me in welcoming Dr. Kyle Fagala. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a spectacular day. And I'll tell you why, because I finally got one of the people who I really have admired for so long to be joining us on the podcast. We're talking to Dr. Kyle Fagala. And where I know Dr. Kyle Fagala from is from in the incredible digital marketing agency that he's created called Neon Canvas, and also from being host of the Digital Orthodontist Live. He has a YouTube channel, but he's also a practicing orthodontist, owner of 2 very busy and successful practices, and father of 4. Yes.
That's right.
So as you can imagine, Kyle, you and I have had a hard time finding time to chat, and now everyone knows why. But thank you so much for being here. I'm honored, and I'm so grateful to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And it is just 4 kids. So sometimes as people are doing intros, they check. They're like, you haven't had another one, have you? So no, we are finished. But
officially done.
We're officially done. Can I just say your doppelganger? Who do you hear as your doppelganger? Because I have one that's jumping out at me.
Oh, that's funny. I'll let you say it. I've heard a couple, but go ahead.
Is it Reese Witherspoon?
Yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah. Thank you. I'm honored. Yeah. That's a very nice.
Oh, sure. Who else do you hear?
I will let them have their own faces. People see.
Well, I'm definitely getting a Reese Witherspoon vibe. That's a good thing.
Well, thank you. I think I have one of those faces that fit many people because people think they know me in public, and
really, that's fun.
It's an awesome superpower. I love it. I love it.
No one has ever thought that about me because I don't look like a celebrity, or maybe celebrities don't look like me. One or the other. Maybe both.
You are very recognizable, especially from your YouTube channel. And that's why I want to dive in and explain to people why I'm having you here on this podcast. What I've admired about you from afar, Kyle, is how you've just created yourself over the past few years. You just graduated in 2013 with your orthodontic certificate, and you've created this algorithm of success that's wholly unique to you, which I'd love you to just give us a little taste of this journey, how you got to where you are and what made you so inspired to create all these additional businesses, and what it was that you were reaching for to kind of start the Digital Orthodontist and Neon Canvas. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'll try to give a quick version of that, and thank you for all the kind words. And if you think of a doppelganger that fits me, you just let me know.
I will.
As long as it's not Carrot Top. So I guess the journey on some level begins much younger. My mom was an English teacher, speech teacher. She loved that I tripped up on speech teacher, and play director. And so I did like sound and lights, and then later acted in plays with my mom. And so there's that aspect of me. And then my dad is a very science-driven person, background in botany and plant genetics. And so you kind of marry that, artistic side with that scientific side. And that led me to dentistry, having no clue about orthodontics. I never had braces as a kid. But all throughout high school, my mom also did yearbook. And so I would do yearbook and newspaper, and had this desire to tell stories, and I'd build websites and things like that. So there's always like a creative side. I'm a musician, I'm a drummer. And so managing bands during dental school and college and all that kind of stuff, it sort of pushed me to this place where, a lot of that lay dormant during dental school. You're just studying, you're trying to get through the trudge of it all. But when it came that I had an associateship opportunity, partnership opportunity that fell apart, what was left for us wanting to stay in Memphis where there were no other opportunities, still kind of post 2008 realm where no one wanted to take anyone on, we decided to start from scratch. And I say we because my wife also happened to get into orthodontics before I knew about orthodontics, just finding a job by happenstance. I don't really think by providence, God's kind of, purpose for us. But she ended up in an orthodontic office. And so kind of got into orthodontics through the back door in a sense, and then got into starting my own practice kind of through the back door. And we took a year planning it. Did not want to do that, but it was like our only option. And so we started Saddle Creek Orthodontics from scratch, again, because that was like really all we could do if we wanted to stay in Memphis. So I think with starting a practice, especially de novo practice, you are forced to figure it out. And one part of my personality is I'm always willing to ask questions. I don't know what people's, assumption of me is, but I think when you have a podcast or you have a business or different things going on, they probably think you're cocky or overconfident or maybe have an ego or something like that. Maybe that's true, but I like to think I'm very modest and humble and always willing to accept that someone might know something about a topic more than me. So all that to say, I just asked a tremendous amount of questions, and the Facebook groups came about right as this was happening, which was great timing. Because when you start a practice from scratch, you really have no one else to ask. And so it was really like literally me and Anna, and at the time our second child who like slept under the front desk, as we would start. And I mean, literally you'd have like one patient the first day. I mean, that kind of a thing, which people who started from scratch understand. So built the practice up. At the same time, I had lots of free time. So I would spend that on the Facebook groups, asking questions, learning, really kind of getting a sense of who I would be as a businessman and as a practice owner, but also sharing. And the one thing that I knew about was social media because I had managed bands and I was, first day Facebook pages started, I was on there to help promote my band. I know this is a long story, but it's getting to the point. So then relationships that I had forged building the website to help promote my practice, because that was like the first thing I thought of was like, got to have a great website, got to have a social media presence. And it really worked for us. I met Alex Rasmussen at another company. He decided we should start a business, and that's how Neon Canvas came about. So it all kind of like makes sense, but it's a long story. And so it was sort of like, hey, I guess I'll do like a YouTube channel to help share things, because I was lecturing. People would ask me questions about, how to do this or that. And it was not possible increasingly to answer everyone's individual questions. So I was like, well, I've been asked 15 times how to do this exact thing. So I'm going to do a YouTube channel and answer those things, and I can just send them the link. And then, of course, from there, I started doing the live interview show, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. I love sharing. I love teaching. I think some of my mom being a teacher has influenced that. I do teach at the dental school, and I love that aspect of what I do every day as an orthodontist, even if it's teaching kids how to brush their teeth. Like, I just love that aspect. And so it's an extension of me. It scratches this creative itch that I have. And so I hope I answered that succinctly enough, like 6 minutes there. Sorry, Tarryn, you were very kind to just smile and listen. But that's the short version, I guess.
That was a brilliant version. I loved it because I picked up on so many things there. One of the superpowers I've admired in you from afar is your relationship building ability. It really does come through so beautifully. And I wonder how much you have recognized that in yourself, and if that's something that you've actively cultivated, or if it really was just this curiosity, just wanting to learn. How do you feel about that in terms of the relationship building that you've done over time, and how has that impacted your success?
I mean, relationships are everything. I didn't grow up in a family that knew anything about business, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way. I don't know if they maybe valued relationships quite as much. And I'm an introverted person for what it's worth. And it's always interesting to hear, of creative people or those that are perceived to be creative or whatever you want to say they're introverted, people that have podcasts or whatever. But lots of comedians and lots of actors, I've heard interviews say that, they're introverted, which has always sounded strange, but I am. So like for me to get refueled, it's to go into my room by myself and close the shades, and watch some TV or something. But I've always valued relationships, and certainly in the orthodontic world, when you actually finally land where you are and your identity is sort of cemented, at least in the professional sense, to find like-minded people has been such a gift. And so I just think of the handful of people that I've known since the beginning of this, and even before the beginning of orthodontics. Like those friendships mean the world to me. And the fact that people who are highly successful were willing to get on the phone or to share via Messenger or whatever it was, I wouldn't say that it was a unique thing, but maybe it was. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like orthodontics has been the point in my life where I feel like I've peaked on some level, that I finally found kind of my people or my tribe, as it were. And I think, Facebook was the thing that allowed me to truly find the people that really like me. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, I mean, maybe I would have met them through SAO or the AAO or something like that, but it would have been different. It would have been more difficult, I think, to connect. So I don't know if I'm like particularly gifted at that or if I've just been very fortunate, but yeah, relationships are huge.
Yeah. And, the other thing that was interesting to me is how you had that challenge initially in your career where you didn't have anywhere to work. You had to really
Sure.
create something new. And you keep mentioning your creative spark and the love you have for creating things. And how I wonder what success looked like to you back then and how it's changed over time. So
Yeah.
what you imagined, when we start out in our careers, we have this vision of what that's going to be like, especially when you're in dental school or in orthodontic residency. You have this idea of what success should be. And I just wonder how that has changed for you over the past few years in this very busy, multi-passionate world that you live in.
Yeah. Well, it's changed a lot. I didn't have like huge preconceived notions, certainly had no notion of having two businesses. And, Neon Canvas has grown to a place where it's outpacing my orthodontic practice, which is wild to say. But I mean, we have clients in 43 states and Canada, and it's that has exploded well beyond what I would have ever expected. And I never even expected it. So clearly it's outpaced that. The orthodontic practice, I mean, I guess, we've been in it for 8 years now, and like we'll be a 700 start practice, so it's a healthy practice. That's probably about what I expected. I mean, on some level, I mean, what did I know? But I mean, success when you first start is, can we get this stupid thing built out and opened, and before that, can we get the loan money? I mean, like success is something you always put out on the horizon for better or worse, and you're sort of always working towards that next goal. I'm very task oriented, so that's good. But in the first year, you do 100 starts and you think that's amazing, right? And then the next year you grow and you grow and you grow. And I think what's changed for me maybe in the last year or two is that, my greatest currency now is time.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out, and this will play into the happiness conversations we'll have, but trying to figure out how to best spend that time. And that's what's become difficult, because I feel like I look around and I'm just suffused with all these amazing opportunities and things I could do and great relationships, but I can't possibly invest in all of them to the degree I would like. And so I think prioritization has been a big focus for me the last year or two, as it has been for a lot of people with COVID, because I think COVID on some level sort of tore down a lot of the things that we had built up, our towers, as it were, and then we get to choose how we want to rebuild them. And so I would like to say that I have prioritized my family and the close relationships more, but I think truly I've still prioritized the things that force me to prioritize them, like seeing 80, 90, 100 patients a day, or Neon Canvas, or the Facebook group, or the podcast, So I would like to say, and I think maybe I'm jumping ahead, but prioritizing the things that are most significant, not necessarily most urgent, but most important, is how we should live our lives.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the most valuable stuff in life. Those are the things that, create legacy that will matter to us on our deathbed, as it were. I'm trying. I at least know what I should do. Doing it is always a little more difficult.
So what are those things you should be doing at this point in your life?
Oh, I've got 4 kids, so I should be, most focused on being a great dad, being a great husband, being a great person, or aspiring to be a great person, to whatever that means to each person. I think it's easy. I talk about this Eisenhower matrix when I speak, and it's talked about all the time. But things that are important or not important, things that are urgent or not urgent. So obviously, we shouldn't spend any time on things that are not important. Of course, there's some element that we have to. And importance is subjective and arbitrary, but I think we understand what that means. We spend time on things that are urgent, whether it's important or not important. So urgency drives behavior. And as an orthodontist, the urgency of the day is seeing all your patients, trying to make them happy. And it's important that we do that. But the things that most often get ignored but that are most valuable are things that are not necessarily urgent, but that they're important. And so spending time with your kids, as sad as it sounds, it's not urgent. You know, it's easy to put that off, to take another call, to send another email. But those are the things. That's the quadrant, I think, that's most often ignored, but that will mean the most long term. Sadly, we increasingly, due to social media, due to entertainment, and due to distraction, we spend times on things that aren't important, but that have either actual urgency or a false sense of urgency. And then some things have no urgency or no importance at all. Netflix, Hulu, whatever it may be, fantasy sports, you know, and we dump a lot of time into those things. So I've tried to eliminate those things and try to put things into perspective, but it's tough. So that's my daily struggle.
Yeah, you're not alone. I mean, this is
Sure.
this is the insight that's so fabulous to share, because we see ourselves in those stories. Absolutely. What did you used to think was important that you realize no longer is?
You know, I think I evoke things from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People anytime I talk. So, you know, I think it talks in there about your core, you know, and kind of what your actual number one priority is really at your core what is most important to you. It's never been money for me. For most people, that's probably what it is. For others, maybe it's status or importance. For some, it's relationships. For others, it's their family. What Stephen Covey says is that it should be your values. And then from that would emanate being a good father, being a good friend, being a good husband, being a good businessman or businesswoman. So I try to get back to that. And so I'm a Christian. And so like those principles, those larger things, those things that will matter, not even just at the end of your life, but beyond that, that's what your core should be. That's what should drive all your decisions. So I don't know that that's really changed. I think I've been fortunate to have a good foundation and a good perspective. Hopefully I've improved, you know, on those things and my understanding of those things. But certainly there are times where you're just starting out and what your core becomes is building your practice or trying to pay down debt, or, you know, as you're starting to lecture and speak or have a Facebook group, is try to make that engaging and popular and get people to join, or, you know, all those things can sort of vie for your core and what's most important to you. I've tried to keep that in perspective again. So I don't know that it's really shifted so much. I mean, there's probably times in my life where trying to get the best grades that I could, or, you know, has seemed most important, or as a teenage boy, like, you know, some girl was probably like my most important thing, you know, but that's only lasted so long. And so I'm very fortunate now to have a super supportive wife, a great family, everyone's healthy. I mean, both of our sets of parents are alive and with us. And so, you know, knock on wood, everything is great. You know, the big like pillars of life are in place. And so it allows me this sort of privilege to try to focus on these things that are most important. Of course, as pillars fall, it changes your perspective and your priorities. And so that's definitely happened. As life has gotten more difficult, as it's gotten more complicated, you know, oftentimes pillars start to crumble and it pulls you off of your course, as it were. But it's why it's so important to sort of daily remind yourself, whether it's in prayer or it's in meditation time or it's in, you know, reading the Bible or whatever it is that you do, you know, jogging around the block, you know, whatever people do to center themselves, is to remind yourself of kind of what are the key priorities in life, and to keep, you know, again, like a ship, you know, keep going straight ahead in the way that you should and not get off course.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so what is that daily practice for you? I mean, how do you maintain that perspective with 2, 3 businesses, a very busy schedule, kids
Yeah.
waking up in the middle of the night? So what is that practice for you to maintain that
Well,
focus on the North Star?
yeah. Well, I wish I could say that I had those daily practices. I wouldn't say I'm the best at that. You know, like I aspire to be like a John Maxwell type person that, you know, has a certain set of things they wake up and do every day. I'm a terrible morning person.
Not what I
So
expected, Kyle, to be honest with
yeah,
you.
no, I know.
But
I'm
thank
a
you.
night owl, if anything.
Wow.
So I work really well during the day, and
Mm.
you know, I have systems that allow me to make sure that I get things done. I'm a zero inbox kind of person, but that means that I'm pretty glued to my phone throughout the day. So I'm always multitasking, as it were. I think I'm okay at it. But no, I mean, what I should do and what I do are different things, But I've started working out 3 times a week, so I'll get up at 5:45 and do that. That's been really good. I go to church every week, every Sunday. I mean, we have certain things. I have a Tuesday morning Bible study with the 3 close friends, and that's been good. So that kind of keeps me regular, as it were. But I should be doing, some things more regularly. I mean, of course, everything's a work in progress. Again, if I could force myself to do things, I'd be waking up every morning at 5:45. I'd spend an hour, reading and praying and thinking about the day. As it is, I maybe do it half of what I should. Some things, though, that I do that I think are helpful is every year I write out a goal sheet in 7 different categories of different important parts of life. And I set goals, and that stays on my mirror in my bathroom. So that reminds me, every day on some level, kind of what it is that I should be focused on. And then every week I have a sheet. It prints off the people who've referred patients to me that week, and I text them just to thank them, just to connect with them. And then I write kind of in priority order the things I want to accomplish that week. I found that doing a daily list, it's too much. And I found that doing a digital list, for some reason, it's not tangible enough. I like to mark things off. I like to be able to write and add, and kind of becomes like a sketchbook in a way. And then at the bottom of that page, I have my goals that won't be completed that week, that are kind of long-standing cycling goals. So things that maybe will be completed in a month or 2 or 3. My podcast schedule, that I plan to do is on there, that sort of thing. Goals for Neon Canvas, goals for the Facebook group, and then, goals for our family. So those things at least keep the loops in view. And, good productivity and good follow-through requires that you close loops whenever you can. And really, though, that you're aware of the loops in life. Because if I didn't have it all written down and kind of on my war table, it would, all day long, I'd be wondering, what was that thing I needed to do? So I'm always very good about trying to throw things down on the sheet. And sometimes you throw things down on the sheet right before you finish them, so you can mark them off and you feel good about it, right? So it's like a little dog treat. But that's one way that I keep myself productive.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. That's great. That's really good advice. And I love that you give yourself permission to do so throughout the week, because I do think sometimes our days take over themselves, and there are seasons in our lives where our kids need our entire attention that day, and you couldn't possibly get to those other things. So I like that idea of stretching it out over the week, and maybe you can complete 3 or 4 things in an hour, but it matters for the whole week. Yeah. I love that permission. That's awesome.
Well, I give myself permission because I know I'm not going to do it otherwise, and what's worse than having a sheet for the day and doing nothing, and then you feel like a loser. So some days are just either emotionally or physically, you just can't get to doing stuff. And so Saturday is a day, and sometimes Sunday, where I'll just say, I'm not doing anything today. Yeah. And so you sort of give yourself that allowance, and you need days like that. You need days of Sabbath, as it were, and then some days you just you're too busy, or you just didn't get around to it, or just didn't feel right. And so then, I'll get back to it tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I love that permission. I think that means a lot coming from someone who, from the outside, is enormously successful and so multi-passionate and doing so many amazing things. And I love the permission of just being able to give yourself more grace with time and still focusing on the importance, not letting go of it, not letting go of those values and those priorities, but giving yourself some grace with time.
Can I also say, and I know you're jumping into a question, I'm sorry.
No,
I hate when I'm interviewing people and they do this, but let me just take the time to say that the only way that I could ever do the things that I do is having excellent teams. So my wife is amazing. She works with me. She's great. My team at Saddle Creek Orthodontics is awesome. I'm an excellent delegator. I didn't used to be. I'm the OCD perfectionist that a lot of us are. not true OCD. I had someone correct me on that one time. I get it. But I am obsessive, let's just say. Maybe not truly have a disorder, but things have to be an exact certain way. But I've learned over time to delegate. You find that people are not only as good as you, but sometimes better, and so it's great. So you are able to expand your vision and the amount of work that can get done. It can be more efficient and so on and so forth. I think a lot of us struggle with delegation, but we're really struggling with pride or this thought that we're the only one who can do it this well. And then on some level, I've given up that to say, well, if you can get it to a B+, great, because I would have never gotten it to anything, And then at Neon Canvas, I have a team of people that allow me to come up with a creative idea and then actually implement it and get it done. So I just have to insert that to say, like, it seems like I get a lot done, I'm sure, but a lot of that is a product of incredible and talented people that work for me, So that's oftentimes the way you get a lot done is you have people behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And an enormous leadership skill. Definitely. So since you brought up one of what I consider your superpowers, what do you consider your greatest superpower?
So I wrote these down. That's a good question. I think one of them, and it's funny, is superpowers, however cynical you want to be about like superhero universes. There's some shows like The Boys that have gotten at that. And I think, some of the Marvel has gone into that. Whereas as it starts like all positive, then it starts to show the negatives of, having superpowers. I think for every superpower, there's a negative side of that, right?
Absolutely.
But one of them is I'm obsessed with the details. And I kind of alluded to that, but I have the most critical of critical eyes. And, even the design team at Neon Canvas jokes about how I'll notice like a pixel that's out of place or, or whatever. So I think it was Steve Jobs that called, the creator of Google to say that the second O in Google, as it spreads out at the bottom was a different color or something. Like, I'm not saying I'm Steve Jobs, but I do have that kind of like, I will notice little tiny things out of place. And so the corollary to that is that it makes life difficult for those around me, and for myself too. And so you have to kind of like not worry about the different yellow in the second O of Google sometimes, but I do notice those things, which is a good thing when it's a good thing. I think I'm good at mirroring personalities. And so that's always helpful when you're meeting new people in an orthodontic space, or as you alluded to, relationships. And I don't mirror personalities to manipulate people, but it's to say I think that I appreciate the differences in people, and I'm empathetic to those things, and I enjoy those differences, and I really celebrate that. And so Memphis is a very multicultural space, and I love that. And I love meeting different people, and I love getting to ask people about differences in their lives. And so I don't know if that's a superpower, but I think that's what allows me to be good as an orthodontist. And I think on some level, it's what maybe allows me to be a good interviewer, is I'm truly interested in other people. And then I guess I would say this is that at my core, I really want to make people happy. I want to provide value. I want people to feel important when I'm with them. We've all talked to people where it seems like they're talking to us, but they're always focused on the next thing, or they're kind of looking past us as they're talking to us. And I hate that. And so if I'm with someone, and I'm not perfect at this, but I always want it to feel like it's just the two of us, and that it's the most important conversation I've ever had. Again, not in a manipulative way, just that's what I enjoy. Like I love and savor those opportunities to just have, one-on-one dinner or a small group dinner and just be able to talk. And so it's funny that I've ended up with an interview show, because that's really kind of what that is. But it's just, those are my favorite moments at meetings, is when we can break away from the big, hall and just sit down and chat and catch up. Again, introvert, so it kind of makes sense, but I think that's a superpower perhaps.
Yeah, it's definitely tapping into what lights you up, and your love language, which seems like one of them is quality time, just spending that quality time with people. Yeah. And then, the superpower to me screams that you're incorporating what really matters to you in your business. I mean, you've done that in a beautiful way in each of these businesses, so beautifully. What does happiness mean to you? What is your definition of happiness?
Well, I have given a lecture on happiness multiple times, and then it turned into a lecture on joy, and then it was the keynote, like right in the midst of COVID, was on kind of stress and finding joy and all that sort of stuff. So I have to give like an academic response to this, because I think it's good. I'm going to read, because I asked this question of myself, like, 3 or 4 years into practice, why am I not happier now that I'm more successful and that things are going well. And I really sought to answer that question. Why am I feeling so stressed all the time? So I'm going to read this. Happiness, it's a sense of well-being, joy, or contentment. It's the opposite of sadness. When people are successful or safe or lucky, they tend to feel happiness. And whenever doing something causes happiness, people usually want to do more of it. So that's like kind of an all over the place definition of happiness. But what I found in lecturing on it, again, like with this idea of happiness, is that happiness is like not necessarily the goal, or nor should it be the goal, because happiness depends on circumstances. I think the goal really should be joy, which it's almost to say like happiness is what you seek in your 20s and 30s, but joy is what you find in your 60s and 70s. You know, it's this sort of this peace or this balance or this wisdom. And so I think figuring out the difference between happiness and joy, and why happiness, it's such an elevated currency, certainly in U.S. culture, but I think it distracts from more valuable things. Because I think things that are not important, as we alluded to earlier, can bring happiness. But I think that things that are important are what truly bring joy. And sometimes like carving out time for things that are important, but maybe not urgent again, they may not even make you feel happy in the moment, but they can bring joy long term. So it's almost like the difference in like an investment and then just spending money on entertainment, as it were. So I want to read this. Happiness depends on circumstances. I said that, but you know, when things are good, we're happy, and that's easy. You know, I've got my Michael Jordan cup. He's the GOAT, if you want to know. I love basketball, but he's the best. But when teams are winning, they get along. Yeah. You know, any team can get along, whether they have culture issues or they have chronic, you know, disagreements or there's something wrong. If they're winning, doesn't matter. Same thing with our team, same thing with our businesses, same things with our families. But if things go wrong, all of a sudden we're not happy, right? Because we've based our way of engaging with one another, or our way of viewing success, or, you know, healthiness, you know, emotionally, on whether things are good or not. And so that should not be the goal. So Billy Graham says that joy depends on God. So obviously, you know, Christian preacher, we dig into that more. Brene Brown. So I know some people listen to this are religious, some are not, but Brene Brown, really respected, you know, kind of secular speaker, you could say. She changes that last part to joyfulness is tied to spirit and gratitude. And so joy is a deeper thing. It's again, it's more about your core and your values and the things that matter most to you, not just circumstances. So the most joyful and at peace people, they can be okay despite the circumstances that are swirling around them. You know, and so it's in the midst of a storm, can you be kind of sitting on the boat okay? You know, there's a story in the New Testament about Jesus being on a boat and everyone's freaking out, and he's okay. Now he's okay because he controls, you know, nature, but can we be okay in the midst of a storm? I think that's the goal. Not can we be okay when it's sunny and the weather's perfect. I would hope everyone could be okay during that. You know, it's rather during the storm that it matters. And so can we be at peace? I think that's what happiness means. I know that's the longest answer ever, but there you go.
No, it's a beautiful answer. And it's such a fascinating discussion. It could go on for days. We could talk about those definitions. And I really appreciate your perspective. So what brings you joy in this current climate? What brings you joy on a daily basis?
That's a good question. I guess like a sense of peace with other people, like with my relationships. And I'll be honest, as things get busier, as I get more successful, I find that that's harder on some level. And I hate that. Like whether it's, you know, an ex-employee or it's, you know, a former friend, or I don't know if it's, as you become successful, people become more judgmental or more apt to be critical, or it's a jealousy thing, or if it's just that I'm not putting in the time that I should into those relationships. But I want peace with all people. Like that's where I feel most joyful and most at rest. I think when I actually have the time to spend on those most important things, that's what leads to joy. And I think honestly, like when I feel most connected on a spiritual level to the one who created me, like that's where I feel most joyful and at peace. When I get caught up in just the busyness of life or the stresses of life or the temporal distractions of life, that's where I'm least happy. So it's a constant battle to, again, push away the things that are external and focus instead on the things that are internal that I have control over. I can't control the external. I can't control the wind. So I have to feel the wind but ignore it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Living this very secular life, but as a spiritual being. Yeah.
I'm starting to sound like the Dalai Lama a little
You're
bit.
sounding
So
great.
I apologize.
No, please don't apologize. I think, this is what we all need to hear. And it's a challenge every day, living in this very secular world with goals and checklists and
Yeah.
passions, very secular passions, and then still being able to tap into that very spiritual, peaceful side and recognizing the value of it.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that, the spiritual side, because I feel like that's like how would you say that? That's like a increasingly tough topic to bring up because we are an increasingly naturalistic or secular culture, and I think this will be a deeper philosophical conversation. But we either believe that there's something outside of what we can experience with our five senses, or we don't. Unfortunately, like a truly naturalistic view on life, it should lead one logically to a place of nihilism, or to think that things don't matter. So eat, drink, be wealthy, for tomorrow we may die. I mean, that really should be the extension of that logically. It doesn't have to be, and that's a whole nother, I'm not trying to judge people on their worldviews, but, but that's no way to live. People can't live without a sense of purpose or of hope. But if this is all that there is, and we're just going to freeze to death in, a few more million years, that's a tough way to view life. And so we all have to have purpose. We'll have to have hope. As a Christian, or as someone that has, a sense of the spiritual world, or, you could even say a hope of the spiritual world. I mean, faith is not something that's always 100%, but, you have this, I need to believe that. I want to believe that. I taught this past Sunday on the topic of faith, and it's a difficult topic. But considering that is how I view the world, there's four things that are important that you need to fill in, and it's your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's from a verse in Luke about love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But those four kind of like auras, if you want to call them, or like aspects of life, they show up in all kinds of religion in some way or another. And I think a balanced life, I think a joyful life, I think a happy life is one where you have proper balance into those four things. And so most of us are good at one or two or maybe three, but rarely all four. And so if it's your mind, it's the intellectual side of life, it's having deep conversations, it's learning things, it's reading a book, it's continuing education, whatever it may be. Your heart, it'd be your relationships, it'd be the love in your life, it's the important, things. Your soul, your spirit, or what do you want to say? It's like, those are the religious things. That's prayer, that's meditation, that's taking time to center yourself and to connect with, whether you're a Christian, with God or with Jesus, or whether you're kind of from a different way of life, it's connecting with the universe, or whatever that is for you. Those are important things. And then the last one's strength. And I'm pretty good at those other three, but the strength is the tough part, like working out, dieting, sleeping. Those are all good, but almost like a wheel with four different spokes. If one of those you've put too much effort into or too little effort, the wheel gets wobbly and it gets out of balance. And so I think that's really the goal to aspire to, is to seek balance in those four, heart, soul, mind, and strength. If you can seek balance in those things, that's a good goal.
Oh, I love that. I couldn't agree more. And I think you're right. We tend to naturally be drawn to two or three of them and then miss that fourth one, and really creating more perspective in terms of the importance and the value of the balance of all four of those aspects is critical. And sometimes it's just that one piece that's missing.
I would offer that it's increasingly, and I say in our culture, which is kind of a trite thing to say, but I think in the way that our world values things, it's increasingly to take the spiritual side out. And I think that's to our detriment.
And especially in business and in dentistry. And I appreciate you acknowledging this, because this is one of my passions as well, is to bring that aspect into these incredible men and women, literally putting smiles on other people's faces on a daily basis, and giving them permission to explore that aspect of it, and to recognize how when you do, you get even more empowerment to be able to do what you came here to do. Yeah.
And just to kind of push on this a little bit more, is that the reason that all people are valuable, if you're a Christian, it's because you believe that you're created in the image of God, and everyone then is created in the image of God. whether they're good people or they're bad people, or whether they're attractive or unattractive, or whether their personality stinks or they have body odor. Like, they're all created in the image of God. And so in that way, you're connecting to God as you take care of them and as you bring joy to their lives. And that should be the way that you view a day, is that everyone is like you in that way.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that, and you believe that we're all stardust, well, we're all stardust, so there's value in that too. So I think, again, the spiritual side of life, it can mean a lot of different things, but I don't think it's as directly rewarded as the other three. If we invest in our relationships, obviously there's value in that. We invest in our mind and we strategize and we increase our business and our profits go up, that's rewarded. We invest in strength. We feel better because we slept, because we worked out. We look good on in our beach photos. But the spiritual side, I think, is actually more important than the other three, but it's easiest to ignore because the returns are not immediate.
It's interesting. This is such a great conversation, and we'll wrap it up soon. But I just
Sure.
wanted to comment in that, from my perspective, just looking at your story and looking at the journey that you've taken, there's actually been enormous spiritual interjection in terms of following your passions. If you think of that as a spiritual kind of intuitive or precedence or some kind of, you mentioned providence, some
Right.
kind of an influence that you take up and you say, this is actually something I'm really interested in. I'm going to follow it. There was no reason other than just the passion for it and the fun of it. And
Sure.
actually, isn't that perhaps a spiritual influence that then allows you to give more? I mean, if you never created Digital Orthodontist Live, you wouldn't have made such a big impact in so many people's lives. And it really
Sure.
only was born from a fascination and a fun and a following a passion. I know from watching you on Digital Orthodontist Live, you give so freely. I mean, I have always been so amazed at the generosity of the content you give for free in
Yeah.
that on that platform, and I can tell it's just because of your passion around it. But once again, can that not be viewed as a spiritual influence in terms of just following what you love and the enormous impact that has and success, real dollars and cents success that can come from following the spiritual intuition?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wrote down some stuff. I won't go into it, but I do think that again, just speaking freely as a Christian, again, I know that's not how everyone thinks, and it may sound like silliness to those that don't believe it, and that's fine. But I believe that we have a purpose in life and that we're designed to do certain things, and I do think that opportunities are brought into our life, for spiritual purposes. And I think in order to bring about good and to bring about glory to God, and I have to believe that a lot of the opportunities that have come about have been for that purpose. I really do. And I've not done it perfectly, and I don't always listen and answer in the way that I should, but I try to. Another thing would be that in order to say yes to some of those opportunities, I've had to say no to others.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, obvious thing. But I think a lot of us say yes to things that we should have said no to. And that because we said yes to things that didn't matter, that we end up saying no to things that do. And so I think that's a good reminder, is to really pull weeds from our lives and remove relationships and remove priorities that aren't going to get us to where we need to be. And so that's probably a daily, weekly process that we should be involved in. It's the pruning of our own, bushes, and I like to think I can get better at that too, saying no to some things. My rule now is that if something could happen without my involvement, I can't be a part of it. I have to say no to it. And so it's only if my unique involvement adds value to it that's unique, should I be involved in it. And of course, we all sit on boards and we do things and do whatever it is, maybe that we don't want to do. But I try to increasingly, the way that I get things done that matter is that I say no to a lot of stuff.
Wow, that's great. That's great advice. This has been fascinating, Kyle. I think I'm so grateful once again to you for coming on the show and just for showing us another side of you. I think so many of my audience members who have followed you on YouTube will be really fascinated to see this other side of you and really to get a little bit of introspection into how you do what you do and your perspective on life and on happiness and on success. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on here. I hope people enjoyed it. It may have rambled at times. I hope you edit it to make it sound really good. So
Oh, don't you
that's what I'm hoping
worry.
for.
The greatest
Good.
thing is that we all get to see ourselves in each other, as you mentioned.
Right.
So that is the most important part about this. So
Sure.
thank you. Have a fabulous weekend.
You too. Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yep,
thank
thanks.
you so much to all of you for joining us here today. This has just been an absolute gift to me and a great conversation. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. And please, if you have not heard of Dr. Kyle Fagala, we've put all the links to where you can find him in the show notes. Please check him out. Check out his incredible Facebook page, private Facebook page. I highly recommend it for all you orthodontists out there. And until next time, please remember that when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye bye.